Dear reader, I'm Tony and this is Book Text. I have for you some recent reads. I am, like many of you, on a coronavirus quarantine, not because I'm sick, but because everything I participate in is closed. My work, I have to teach from home. I'm having church at home. I volunteer at the library, and the library is closed, right? So I'm going to be reading a lot of books, but I wanted to share some recent books for you. Before I begin, the word of the day today is interrobang. It is the name of the punctuation mark, not really well used, but it is a combination of a question mark and an exclamation point. And it is, of course, to express question, but also, that emphasis that the exclamation mark suggests. So, the interrobang. All right, I have 4 recent reads. I've read a lot of other things. I do a lot of religious study, and I also read a lot for professional work. But I have 4 recent reads that I thought you might be interested in. The first, my books fall over. The first is L.M. Montgomery's Against the Odds. This is a collection of short stories, of course, by the author of Anne of Green Gables, among other delightful books. And these are all centered around tales of achievement. Okay, so this is about people who encounter obstacles and through their wit and their perseverance succeed. And my two favorite stories from this collection are called At the Bayshore Farm. And this is a story about a girl who has to miss meeting her favorite writer in order to visit her lonely aunt. And something really cool happens for her instead. And I also enjoyed a story called In Spite of Myself, which introduces us to a character named Augusta Ashley, who basically is a adult who runs a farm by herself, and a man comes to assist her, and he ends up just getting in the way, and then he falls in love with her in spite of himself, right? But I also just noticed that I marked another story in here, so I have 3 favorite stories. This one is called The Strike at Putney, and it is about women who have been told in their local congregation that they cannot have a woman speak at the pulpit, and so they strike, and things go poorly for the men in that congregation, and when they realize the value of their women. It's delightful. I love it. I also read Birds of a Feather by Jacqueline Winspear, and I did this one on audiobook while I was commuting and going for my daily walk. And the audiobook was so good. So I highly recommend that. But this is another of the Maisie Dobbs mysteries. And it's about a socialite who goes missing. And as Maisie is investigating, she discovers some things about the past, about World War I, which of course Maisie has some experience with. And so her life gets intertwined, of course, with the mystery, and Maisie Dobbs stories are kind of sad, but they're really good. I really enjoy the characterizations. I also I finished Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell. I took almost an entire year to read this book, I'm kind of ashamed to say. It is the story of a fallen woman and kind of how she tries to redeem herself. And it's also a story of reconciliation. But I also appreciate that Ruth, in her arc of redemption, becomes a woman who works for herself, and she has a series of jobs to support herself and her son, and about the people who help her and love her and forgive her. Oh, it's a really good story, and it does have a sad ending. It actually reminds me a lot of Gaskell's novella, The Poor Clare. Has a very similar ending, and so I thought that it was reminiscent of that, and I did like both. I'm okay with a sad ending. I also marked, you can tell I've marked with these beautiful rose gold tabs some beautiful passages of nature writing, and I thought I would just read one to you because I wasn't expecting to have a lot of beautiful nature writing in here, but I was pleasantly surprised. So here's a sentence that I marked that I really enjoyed. And it's in the moment of Ruth's kind of realizing what she's done. Yet afterwards, long afterwards, she remembered the exact motion of a bright green beetle busily meandering among the wild thyme near her, and she recalled the musical, balanced, wavering drop of a skylark into her nest near the heather bed where she lay. I don't know, there's some really well-sounding words there. I love the word thyme in the context of the plant. I love also the word lark, and skylark makes it even better. And the word heather, I mean, there's just some really nice words there. They're pleasant to listen to, meant to be read out loud. So I highly recommend Ruth. I did give this, I think 4 stars. I can't remember, but 4 or 5 stars. It was a good read. And the last book I'll talk about today is called My Angelica by Lynch Williams. I actually know Carol. I have worked with her in a writers conference. She teaches at the same university where I teach, and I've done some NaNoWriMo writing practices with her. She is delightful, hilarious. If you ever get a chance to read one of her books or go to one of her readings, she is so funny. This is, I think it's technically young adult, but I would consider it maybe also like upper, older, middle grade, because it's short read, real easy. It doesn't have a lot of complicated things. It looks misleading, but this is the story of a young woman, Sage, who is a writer, and she wants to be a romance writer, and so she's trying to imitate romance books. And they end up hilariously bad, and she has no clue. And it's kind of the story of what happens when her best friend George is trying to show her that her writing is terrible. And she enters into a writing contest, and things escalate from there. It is so funny. It's also quite heartwarming and charming. There is a romance that happens for Sage that is nothing like what she imagines in her own writing. The Angelica in the title is her main character that she always writes about in all these different scenarios. And Angelica always falls in love with a one-eyed man for whatever reason. That was really attractive to Sage. So funny. Any of Carol Lynch Williams' books are well worth the read. Some of them are quite sad. This one is just super, super funny. So I recommend that. Gave this one for sure 5 stars. It was a read for me too. I'd already read this one years ago, written in, I think, 1999, and it's reminded me of my high school, middle school experiences, you know, without some of the technology that we enjoy today. So I recommend that one as well. Those are my recent reads. They were, of course, My Angelica and Ruth and Birds of a Feather, and last, Against the Odds. I love them. I would recommend any of these books. Remember, there is always another book.